Welcome. We have been engaged in a series called Power, Experiencing It for Yourself. We have been introduced to three miracles in Matthew chapter 8. And you know what's interesting about these texts that we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks is they come in triplets. So you have three miracles that are then followed by three more miracles that are then followed by three more miracles. So you have within Matthew chapter 8 and 9 a storyline that Matthew is developing so that we understand a little bit more about who this Jesus is. So we've already looked at the story of a leper who is ritually unclean, a centurion who has been ostracized because he's a Gentile, and one who is also working for their oppressor, the Roman government. And then we have this healing of Peter's mother-in-law, where Jesus finds her with a fever in bed and just touches her hand, and the fever leaves her. Three miracles that are presented to us just presenting to us a different picture of who Jesus is. One who is willing and who is able and who is good. Three miracles that fulfilled, as Matthew would remind us, Isaiah's prophecy back in chapter 53, verse 4, where it had everything to do with this suffering servant. And we read those words that he took our infirmities and he carried our sorrows. So the miracles themselves, aside from just causing us to be amazed at the power that Jesus is displaying, is also meant to teach us that he is the one who has been promised. He is this Messiah that has come into the world, and we ought to be paying attention. Well, now the story continues for us, right? Look in your Bibles at Matthew chapter 8 and follow along here, verses 18 through 19. It says, when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. And then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Well, the crowd that had come around him is there because Jesus had been healing. After he had healed Peter's mother-in-law, it says people began to come to Peter's home, bringing with them the sick and those inflicted, and Jesus was healing them. So it's understandable that Jesus would look at the crowds around him that no doubt were constant, and now he's finding a need to withdraw and probably regroup with his disciples. And so he's going to go on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. It is a lake. You may not know this, but the lake is 13 miles long and about 8 miles wide in its furthest part. So it's a pretty substantial body of water. There's a man that comes up to Jesus. It's described here as a teacher of the law. And the man addresses Jesus as a teacher, a title given to Jesus in Matthew. But usually when that title is used, it's only by those who don't really fully believe in him. It's like acknowledging an aspect of Jesus' ministry without fully understanding all of who Jesus is saying that he is. So that while the title is accurate, Jesus is a teacher, it's also not really adequate. And why do I say that? Well, look at verse 20. Verse 20 says, Jesus will reply to this man. He says, "Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Well, in a few moments, we're going to see this boat pushes off, but this guy's not in the boat. Where did he go? I think if we were there, we probably would have seen his footprints in the sand, only it's not with Jesus. He's walking away from the boat. When Jesus tells him, look, the foxes have holes and the birds have nests, but the Son of Man doesn't even have a place to lay his head, whatever he thought following Jesus was going to mean, whatever kind of glory that was going to become, because he's associated now with Jesus, who is doing miraculous healings and who is teaching with authority. Yeah, whatever he thought was going to, be a part of that, he wasn't counting on the cost. And I think that's often the case, right? We want the glory, but we're reluctant to pay that cost. The scribe called Jesus a teacher, but here Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. Now, this text, this title, Son of Man, it comes from Daniel chapter 7, but the term actually is used to focus on the divinity that we find in Jesus. And so Jesus is saying, I am this Son of Man. I am the Son of God. I am this Messiah. And when I look at this text then, I realize that, boy, it's just indicating to us again that very often the world is looking at Jesus and we're giving him titles. We want to put him in this little box. And Jesus is saying, away with the box. I created the box. I'm not just the teacher. I am the Son of Man that has come to take away the sins of man. We go on now, and I want you to look here in Matthew 8:21. He says, another disciple said to him, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. But Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. See, the first guy was maybe overeager. I want to be a part of this, Jesus. But then when he was shown the cost, he was like, yeah, I'm not so sure. This guy seems to be a little undereager. Commentators have said that this expression, let me go and bury my father, may have been understood in the day as, let me wait until my father is dead, implying that perhaps the father was sick, that there was going to be a need for him to pay, closer attention. Some people think that it may have meant something equivalent to, for instance, when my mother-in-law passed away and she was cremated, it was at a time when not everyone could come together. And so consequently, we had to arrange for a time when people could come. I do that here at Bethany quite often. Families are spread across the country. Someone passes away. They're not all able to coordinate their schedules until a particular time, and it may be much time later. And that often took place within the culture here, where sometimes a person, it would be a year's time before they would really be laid to rest. And so what this is underscoring, though, is that Jesus is implying that a decision to follow him needs to be decisive. The present moment is the moment that is at hand. Postponing this decision is met by Jesus with a certain level of rebuke. Jesus is saying he is the Son of Man who will bring us from this life into the one to come. And this, right now, while he is with us, is not a time to procrastinate. Now, when I read this, I thought, whoa, that was really direct. Sometimes we're not sure how to take Jesus in those moments, but Jesus is not here messing around. When you read this text, he's telling them, this is not the time to procrastinate. I am here with you in this moment. And if you really want to follow me, now is that moment. But I started thinking about that, and I said to myself, is this a message for those two would-be disciples alone? Could Jesus be using this encounter to provoke his current disciples to reevaluate their decisions? I mean, after all, it wasn't too long ago, right, where Jesus said to James and John and Peter and Andrew, to leave their nets and to come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. They are still in that process, right, of evaluating those decisions. And then I thought, Is this story meant for you, me, to reevaluate our decision to follow Jesus? See, there are moments, right, in your life that you're confronted with who Jesus is. And something inside you is prompting you saying, look, I got to fix my eyes on him now. I got to run this race of faith. I need to learn and lean into a little bit more of what Jesus is teaching and saying. But if we're not careful, we may not heed the prompting of the Spirit in those moments. And then all of a sudden there's these large gaps that come into our life. And what we meant to do, we didn't do. And the things we should have done, those we're doing. I think what Jesus is saying in here to all those disciples now who have also witnessed the healing of the leper and the centurion's servant and the mother-in-law and all those people who have come, it's time to make a decision. Are you going to follow him or are you not? What we do know is it doesn't appear that those guys got in the boat. So here in verse 23, it says, Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him. And then without a warning, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. There is this storm. Waves and winds are threatening life. You may not know this about the topography of that land, but the Sea of Galilee is surrounded by the land that just rises up to about 1,500 feet. On the one hand, it leads out into the deserts of Syria. On the other side, into the plains that eventually will come down into the Mediterranean. High desert. You can imagine the heat that is produced. So imagine the moisture that comes off of the Mediterranean Sea that catches the warm air over that desert, and then the cooling of the Sea of Galilee with a lake that is, like I said, more than 13 miles long, and in its widest sections about 8 miles wide. It's a recipe for storms, and they can be violent. My family and I, we go down to South Carolina, and one of the highlights is listening to some of those big, booming thunderstorms. And in the summer, they're a regular routine. You know, they're going to last for a little while and then they're going to move on. But sometimes, man, those storms come, that rain falls down like sheets. And when that thunder hits, it just shakes the house. But you read this text now and you realize this is no ordinary storm. You have seasoned fishermen in Peter and Andrew, James and John. They're watching those waves. They're feeling the effects of that wind, and they're afraid. They're looking out, and they're thinking that this is life-threatening. So much so that they wake up Jesus, and they say, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. Where have you heard about water? And where have you heard about winds and waves threatening life, storms that would come? I started to think about that, and I remember thinking about Passover. Oh, you remember Passover, right? Passover is that final plague that God brings to bear on the Egyptians. Moses had been, beseeching Pharaoh to let God's people go. The Israelites don't have any armies. They're not going to fight against this war machine of Pharaoh. But God intervenes, and by plagues, by all of this intervention, he is beginning to break the back of Pharaoh. But this last one, God told the people, he says, get ready, because on this night you're going to leave Egypt. And he said to prepare this meal in haste. You're not going to have time for this bread to rise, so use no leaven. And whatever you cook, you got to eat in this day because you're going to be leaving. When they slaughtered this lamb, they were to take the blood and they were to put it on the doorposts and on the lintels of their home. Because that night, the Spirit of God was going to come into the camp and he would pass over all of those homes that were marked out by this blood of the lamb. And when he found that, those who were inside would be safe. They would be spared. But where he didn't find it, the firstborn of those families would die. You could hear the wailing in Egypt that night. It would affect Pharaoh as his son would be taken. And out of desperation, he just says to the Israelites to go. And God brings a tremendous victory, and the Israelites leave. They're on their way when all of a sudden it probably dawns on Pharaoh, as the text tells us in Exodus chapter 14, that maybe he did this in haste. All of his slave labor now is gone. So it's as if he came to his senses and he changes his mind. And listen to what it says here in Exodus chapter 14 and verse 10. It says, as Pharaoh approached the Israelites now, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. The text will tell you that Pharaoh would take his army, 600 of his best chariots and officers, along with all the other chariots in Egypt, and they were in pursuit now, and they were going to mean great harm. And the people looked, and they were terrified, and they cry out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Really, that's what they were saying. I thought everything that you read, the Israelites were complaining about the severe treatment that they were experiencing under Pharaoh's rule. I thought that they had been crying out to God, not just for a period of time, but the Bible says for over 400 years. There was this sense of oppression that they just wanted to come out from under. But can you blame them? They're now thinking, wow, we're set free. They're now on this journey to inherit this land that God is promising. And they look up on the horizon, and there is this army that's marching. There are these chariots that are in hot pursuit. And they're like, oh man, what did you do, Moses? We never should have done this. Moses answers the people, though, and says, don't be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. That's Moses. Moses understands something about God now, right? He's standing in this gap, and he's saying, don't underestimate the power of God here. But Moses really doesn't understand how that's going to work out. Until all of a sudden, notice what it says in the text here, that the Lord then says to Moses, he says, why are you crying out to me? Wait a minute. God is saying to Moses to say to the people, why are you crying out to me? I would think it would be kind of obvious. It has something to do with that army. It has something to do with that chariots that are bent on their destruction. But he says, why are you crying out to me? I want you to tell the Israelites to move on. I want you to raise your staff and stretch out your hands over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites could go through the sea on dry ground. That day was a great deliverance. Israel was saved from the approaching armies. Not only were they to go through that land on dry ground, God would separate that water, bring a wind that would dry that land, and people would walk on there to safety. And then God would allow the waves to once again join, and as they came together, they swallowed the armies of the Pharaoh. That scene is a pivotal scene that is celebrated whenever Passover comes around, how God delivered Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. Thousands of years would go by, and they would always remember it, even to our present day. In fact, when you open up your New Testament, when you open up your Old Testament, it's probably about 40% of your Bible is poetry. And the songs that are written, they're always going back to this day. This is a pivotal moment when God came alongside and rescued them by doing this tremendous miracle. It was something that was a day that was never to be forgotten. I'd like to give you just a few illustrations of this. One is found in Psalm 106, verse 7. It says, "When our fathers were in Egypt, they gave no thought to your miracles. They did not remember your many kindnesses. They rebelled by the sea, the Red Sea. Yet he saved them for his name's sake, to make his mighty power known." And notice what it says. He rebuked the Red Sea, and it dried up. He led them through the depths as through the desert. And then they believed his promises, and they sang his praise. See, this is a reflection back on that day, and they see God standing in this gap and rebuking the waters. Look at Psalm 69, where it speaks about water again being a metaphor for testing. It says, "Save me, O God, from the water, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in the miry depths where there is no foothold. I have come into the deep waters. The floods engulf me. I'm worn out calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail looking for God. Those who hate me without reason outnumber the hairs of my head. Many are my enemies without cause, those who seek to destroy me." See, when I look at this text, the hatred that David is experiencing from his enemies is akin to drowning, finding him overwhelmed by the waters. So here we have this scene, right, where these water metaphors are always being mixed in, and it's always about God saving people out of them. It's an opportunity for people to give thanks to the Lord, recognizing that his love endures forever. That's what it says in Psalm 107. Listen to these words. Again, referring back to this day of deliverance, he says, "Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm with a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven." Do you catch that? He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the seas were hushed, and they were glad when they saw the calm. See, I think that Matthew is writing this story, and he wants us to take another look at who this Jesus is. In fact, look what it says in verse 26. Jesus will reply to their alarm that they are about to drown, right? And notice what he says. This is Jesus. He says, "You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?" Why are you so afraid? I think I would answer, it has something to do with the wind. It has something to do with the waves. It has something to do with the fact that I don't think we're going to make it. But why would Jesus say that if he also is experiencing this storm? I want us to think about that for a minute. But then he goes on, he says, then he got up, and what does he do? He rebuked the winds. You catch that phrase? He rebukes the winds and the waves, and it becomes completely calm. The men were amazed, and they asked, what kind of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him? You see, when Jesus says, you of little faith, I'm just thinking here for a second. Here is one who is demonstrating he is worthy of your trust and devotion. That all you have to do is see in him the one who what? We just learned through these miracles of the leper and the centurion, and even in the healing of all those who came to Peter's household, not to mention his mother-in-law, that you're serving one, you're following one now who is willing and able and good. He's one who has power. So why are you so afraid? The winds and the waves, they obey him. Wait a minute. The winds and the waves obey him. We just read a number of Psalms, and these are just a small collection of many Psalms in the Old Testament where you see God doing this very thing, calming the waves, hushing the wind. See, here's the point. Only God does that. Only God does that. So what kind of man is this? Where the winds and the waves obey him. This picture is not lost on Matthew. It is very clear that it is God alone who has the power over all creation to do that. And the people of antiquity, they would write those songs about the day when God rescued his people, when God rescues us out of the churning sea. They would pray to God to do that. And now these disciples are in a boat, and they're being confronted with one who is manifesting that same power, who is about to take them to a safe haven, who now looks at his disciples and says, why are you afraid? You have little faith. Did he not commend the faith of the centurion not too long ago? Who said, Lord, I know that you have the authority. You say it and it will be done, just as you said. Don't you see what Jesus is doing in this text is he's forcing us to answer this very question that the apostles themselves are raising, and that is, what kind of man is this? See, you're going to need to arrive at that decision for yourself, just like those disciples. You're going to have to be in this place where now you can say unequivocally, he is not a teacher, not just a prophet, but he is the Son of God that takes away the sins of the world. Everybody in that boat needed to come to that place where a decision was made. Is he worthy of my allegiance? Those reluctant disciples in the beginning, it was a setup to this story. They don't really see Jesus for all that he is. Those disciples are now in a boat, and the only one who stilled the waves and hushed the wind was God himself. And now they have to figure it out. Who is this man? And my friends, you need to arrive at that decision for yourself. You need to experience this for yourself. You need to come to a place and answer that question, who is this Jesus? Matthew is hoping that you come to the conclusion that this Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who says, I and the Father are one, who will tell us that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by him. That's why this story is here. It's Matthew's way of telling us of this experience to press us into a position where you need to make a decision. And if you choose Jesus, you choose life. That question, my friends, is going to be answered for us in the next story. But you're going to have to come back next week for that. But I'm telling you, it gives you a glimpse into this one who is calling you for all of your allegiance. Who is this man that even the waves and the winds obey him? Let's pray. Father, I want to thank you so much for revealing to us something of the power and might that surrounds Jesus, the God-man who existed in the beginning and now took on flesh. And we see him now as one who is full of grace and truth. One who is announcing the kingdom of heaven, not just in words, but in the power of his actions. We see in him acts that only are accountable by God himself. And we're being led to draw those conclusions, to make sure that we're in that boat, that we have settled that in our own hearts, so that our eyes are fixed on Jesus. And we have decided to follow him. I pray, Lord, that your Spirit would teach us and move us toward those conclusions. And as always, we'll be careful to give you all the praise. In Christ's name, amen.